Dun, 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 dun. So yes, we're trying to put Kerbals on Minmus. I've already landed an unmanned probe on Minmus, and this is my first attempt to actually put some live Kerbal-nauts. Brave green-skinned people. Well, and they have to be brave, because look what happens the first time. The first time I try to send the rocket there, it goes kablooey. Everybody who joins my space program. Oh, and I decided to keep going and keep trying. I actually recorded this. I did this whole mission when I was sick with a really bad cold and staying home from work and playing on my computer instead of. Okay, see, and that's why my space program has the bravest Kerbal-nauts in all the galaxies. Because my rockets do crap like that. But so when I did all this, I had a really bad cold, and so my voice was wacky. So I finished the mission. I edited all this video together. I came up with this final cut video, but I didn't want to do the voiceover until my voice healed, until I got over the cold enough, and my voice healed enough that I could do justice to the magistry, the technical marvel that was my flawless, clearly expertly done mission to Minmus. So even though I had already put, see, that's no good. That's not success. Even though I'd already put an unmanned probe on Minmus, I had to design a new rocket, a much bigger rocket to carry people, because people insist on like breathing and having food and someplace to go to the bathroom. So their life support pods are much bigger. I should point out I'm using some mods. The first stage of this rocket, the bottom stage of this rocket, it comes from the Anvil mod. It's a big ass rocket, and I really like it. It looks cool. It looks really sweet. It's got a good delta V that I don't think it's cheating. Oh, okay, see, there we go. Sometimes that big ass rocket pushes so hard that it rams right into the payload. So here I am in the editor attaching more struts, just putting more cables, or not even, well, I guess it's like stiff cables. So I'm adding more of these support beams from the big ass rocket to the payload so that the big ass, and then that happens. Like, okay, let me make it safer, and then it blows up on the launch pad, or it does whatever the hell is happening now. This is not winning. That there, tiger's blood all over the ground because the tiger just exploded. Anyway, I like this rocket. Oh, there we go. I had a few too many boosters. Maybe it was a little too much thrust, a little too much power. So in the editor, and that's all in super fast time. When I'm in the editor, I'm not that quick. I just sped it up for the video. I wanted you guys to get a taste. I almost never put what I do in the rocket builder screen in these videos, because for the most part I think it would be super boring for you. But in this case, I wanted to give you a glimpse that every time a rocket blows up, I go into that editor and I do a redesign. So that was just a fast forwarded redesign. Now here we have, this is a pretty promising launch. I don't remember the video too much anymore. It's been over a week since I edited the video, and longer than that since I actually did the mission. And so I don't remember exactly, but this looks like this must have been my successful launch. Now to actually go to Minmus, I decided what would be fun would be to do it to build the rocket in orbit and have two different parts of the rocket and make it one great big rocket. So what we're doing here, this is just the bottom stage of the rocket. There, we've just let go of the Anvil rocket, and this part that we see now is the main engines for our mission to Minmus. But fortunately, nobody has been on board. This has been unmanned. So all of these explosions and crashes that you've been witnessing, no Kerbals were injured in the filming of this first part of the program, of the recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this part of the ship and I'm just going to dock it in orbit around Kerbal, and then I'm going to send up a second ship, phase 2, or stage 2, I suppose. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. I'm still not 100% over my cold. Let's see, then I send up stage 2 and I dock stage 2 with this part. And so this part is all engines and gas, all engines and fuel. And the next stage that I'm going to bring up and connect to this is going to be the life support and the pod and the lander and all that stuff. Now, what this does, what building it like this lets me do, is it lets me build a much bigger rocket. Because you saw how tricky it was just to get the engine component into orbit. And you can see the pusher, which is what I named the engine component, is getting that into stable orbit. Um, but if I had built this part and the life support and lander and everything all connected together on the planet, and then tried to shoot it all up into orbit as one unit, then it would be a much heavier payload, and it would be a hugely. So there it is. There it is. That's the pusher. And here we're launching. Again, we're using the Anvil rocket. I think this looks cool. I really like the way this Anvil rocket looks. Some of these mods are a lot of fun. See, and that's our payload on top. And it's a big, heavy payload. The payload is actually, there we are inside the cockpit looking at my co-pilot. This pilot Kerbal is looking at his co-pilot Kerbal, his co-Kerbal. We're actually using another mod for what we're putting on Minmus. What we're putting on Minmus comes from the home pack. That's H period, O period, M period, E period. And that home module is really pretty cool. It's specifically designed for letting you set up a permanent base on moons or other planets. Minmus, of course, is the second moon of planet Kerbin, and the furthest moon out from Kerbin. Kerbin has two moons, the Mun, which is much closer, and then Minmus, which is further away. So, but yeah, this home pack is specifically designed for building stations on even other planets if you can get them that far. They're kind of heavy. These modules are kind of big and heavy. Um, and that's part of why I wanted to do it this way. I wanted to, and here we're desperately trying to get them lined up. Oh, and then I'm launching again. You know what? I think that first time, I think I never did get it docked. I think I ran out of gas just trying to get it connected. So then we're going to try again. Hello, little Kerbal guy, little Kerbal. The rendezvous is really, but I wanted to do it that way because I can get a bigger payload. You know, if I launch the two parts of the vessel separately, I can put them together in orbit, and then I can get a much bigger ship. And this was important for me not to get to Minmus. I could get to Minmus with a single rocket, but I wanted to practice this docking maneuver of combining parts in orbit, because that's how you would build a space station. If you wanted to build a space station, the same way the International Space Station was built was by sending up small individual components. Well, maybe not so small, but smaller individual components, and then hooking them all together in orbit to build a space station. Also, a multi-stage rocket like this would be very useful for traveling to other planets where I would need bigger ships and more fuel. And so if I want to travel outside of the Kerbin system, this might be a way to build the big rocket ships that I would need to get to other planets. And of course, now that I've landed on the Mun, I've landed probes and people on the Mun, and I've landed a probe, and at the end of this mission, I will have landed people, Kerbals, on Minmus. Oh, see? I'm trying. There's the pusher, and there's the module, and I bumped into the pusher as I was trying to make my maneuver. Trying to get these guys hooked up is really super tricky. It gets easier with practice, but it was really hard. But yeah, so I wanted to, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to learn this maneuver. I wanted to practice building things in orbit so that in the future I could build big ass ships to travel to other planets or space stations or whatnot. And now that I've gone to the Mun and Minmus, going to other planets that's the next challenge. That's the next step, is to get out of the Kerbin system and go to Eve or Duna or Jewel or something exciting like that. Anyway, so here I am in the cockpit as we're trying to line up and dock these ships together. Uh, This was super hard, but it was really satisfying, and I think these shots are really cool. I think this looks fantastic. The two different modules, trying to get them together. I used a lot of mechanical jeb, which is essentially it's a mod, it's a plugin that's essentially like an autopilot. And mechanical jeb was both useful and infuriating. Sometimes mechanical jeb's autopilot would be great, and then other times it would just kind of stop doing anything, and I would have to take over manual control. Like right now, I'm driving it manually, and here we go. So at the end of each of these are docking ports, and when they get close enough together, they magnetize and they just pull each other together, and that's about to happen. It's so close. Come on, guys, just kiss. You're so close. Just make out a little. Come on. So I'm pushing it in a little close. There we go. And you can see they just magnetized. They just both got pulled together. And when that happens, you want to turn off your engines, your maneuvering thrusters, your RCS, turn off everything, and just let the docking clamps work things out, because they're passionately making out, and eventually they'll connect and be just a single space vessel. So they're just wobbling around. Here we are inside the cockpit, and you can see they're moving around. It might be. There we are. My co-pilot's kind of excited. And as soon as it finally stabilizes, the camera is going to suddenly change. And I think we're about to do that. This did work eventually. And there, when the camera suddenly does this thing, it is now one spaceship. They are successfully docked, and it's now one craft with a big ass set of engines in the back and a big ass landing module and home um, house, a house on the front. And this is now a ship that's ready to fly to Minmus and land on Minmus and let these two brave astronauts, Bill and Jebediah, you know, with the home module there, they could stay on Minmus for months. It's got food, it's got plenty of space to take off your spacesuit and move around in. It probably got a little shower in there. It's a nice place. It's an extending living environment. Not like poor Curtin, who's living in space for months or years now in nothing but his spacesuit. These guys are going to have a little house on Minmus, and so that'll be nice. They can put on their spacesuit, go outside, explore Minmus, do experiments, collect the Minmusian rocks and soil, get Minmusian soil samples and look for life. And then they can come inside after a hard day of work, and they can take off their spacesuits, sit around in their Kerbal underwear in their little house here, in their little home, and play some Xbox, watch some TV, relax before another day of hard work tomorrow. So here we are. I've taken one of the boys out of the ship after the docking. I wanted to just kind of jetpack around, fly around the ship, and give it a visual inspection. Make sure that nothing got damaged during the flights. Make sure that everything connected and hooked up together. So he's turned on the little lights inside of his helmet so he can look around and just kind of examine the spaceship. Of course, partly that's good role playing, but also I just wanted to do it because I thought it would look cool. There's that must be the Mun in the distance there, and he's just kind of drifting around the ship, looking at everything. I just thought this created some nice cinematic points. Now, I remember a time when it was a challenge for me just to put a satellite in orbit. And then it was a huge challenge to send a rocket ship to the Mun, to get my rocket ship and the Mun to be at the same place at the same time was incredibly difficult. Like the Mun was a huge it was a difficult target for me to hit the Mun with my rocket ship. And now I'm hitting a little tiny, what, 10, 20-meter spaceship with another 20-meter spaceship. You know, it's like it used to be difficult to get the bullseye on the Mun, and now I'm hitting a much smaller bullseye, which is my other spaceship. And the first time I sent a Kerbal out on an EVA to float around his spaceship with his jetpack, that was poor Curtis Curdman. Or Curden Curdman? I never did know what his name was. Whatever. He's floating around in space forever, a casualty of my space program. I should probably at least figure out what his actual name was, but whatever. Anyway, I should look at his Facebook page or something. And now he has lots of time to update his Facebook page. But here we go. These guys are finally on their way, flying their, big ass two-part multi-stage spaceship. And there's Minmus. There it is. It's a beautiful planet. I love that color green. It's so much more interesting. I spent a lot of time on the Mun, and it's all gray. And so this beautiful green colored planet was a lot of fun. Well, moon was a lot of fun to be on. But yeah, I think they're going to have more planets and more places to go and to explore after we finish. There's only so much we can do there. They're so excited. There's only so much we can do in the system here. And so these big multi-stage spaceships are really the future of the Gadget Hovel space program, I think. That's really, when we go out into the stars, that's what we're going to do. So there we go. We've just decoupled. The engine section did a good job of pushing us all the way here to Minmus. But now we have abandoned it. It'll orbit Minmus. In theory, it's still got gas in it, too. In theory, we could come back and dock with it. Now, here's a big oops. I fired up my engines after disconnecting so that I could start to move towards the planet, and I didn't realize that firing the engines like that meant I was pushing myself back towards the pusher engines. So I almost ran the home module into the engine module, but I got it straightened out with a little last second high-powered turn. And now the landing module, the lander, is ready to come down here and just land on the planet. Minmus has these frozen lakes or frozen oceans even, of something. And all I know from what I read on the wiki site and from the one lander that I sent here, the one probe that I sent here, is that these little lakes are in fact solid. These frozen lakes are solid. You can land on them. Now it's kind of boring because it's all these big sections of flat land, but it's way easier to land on big sections of flat. So I set a course to land on one of these frozen lakes or frozen oceans or whatever. But you can see I wanted to land near the edge of it, so there would be some mountains and hills over there to explore. Because I figure, these brave Kerbal knots, when they do leave the pod, they're going to want to get some exercise. They can go climb these mountains. They can go for a hike, and that'll help them exercise their muscles and maintain their bone density in this low gravity environment. I really like to take care of my Kerbals, the ones that don't explode, the ones that don't perish in rocket accidents or crash landings or get stranded floating in space. The ones that survive, I really try to take good care of them. The 1 out of 10 Kerbals that survive my program, I feel like they have a really good quality of life. And here we go. Look at how far I've come. There was a time when I couldn't even put an unmanned satellite in orbit or have a guy step outside his spaceship on an EVA mission without the ship flying away from him, leaving him stranded in orbit for the rest of his life. And now I'm landing softly, gently, setting down living modules on Minmus. I've really come a long way. So here I am shutting down all of the engines because I would hate to hit the wrong button and activate the engines and have it take off again at a time when I didn't want to. Like, say, when nobody was at the driver's seat and nobody was in the command module or whatever. And that would be bad. But here we are. We're landed on the surface of Minmus, and this is beautiful. So yeah, it's time to get out of the ship and it's time to start looking around and exploring Minmus. Now, this home module, this is the recon module. It made sense to me to send the recon home module out first. And it's got some things it can do. It's not just a big tin can that we pretend, that we role play has things inside of it for people to live in. It actually can do some stuff. And that's what we're going to deploy. But first, we have to play with the low gravity. Minmus actually has lower gravity than the Mun, which is part of why this guy can survive a big jetpack joyride that like he just took. The Mun, one of my brave Kerbals, one out of the 9 out of 10 Kerbals who dies in my program, died by jetpack jumping around like this guy is on the Mun. And this is kind of, he's going to need some Kerbal equivalent of Advil or Tylenol or something, because he's got to have a headache after that. And not a happy face. He's not happy. This guy, boom. There we go. I was trying to get him over to the mountain. See, now I had a Kerbal jetpacking around the Mun, who I got him going so fast and so high with his jetpack that when he hit the surface of the Mun, he died. He exploded, which was sort of tragic. So I was actually trying to be careful, but I was hoping that, especially since Minmus has even lower gravity, there he's having fun now, because Minmus has even lower gravity than the Mun. I figured it was safer to have him jetpacking around because the gravity would not pull him down to the surface quite so hard. Although obviously he still had some pretty rough landings. Ooh. This is why there's two of them. If he breaks his leg or his head, the other one can come give him some emergency first aid, or can at least bury the body. So, it's best to send your Kerbal out in teams. It's like swimming, always explore space in pairs, so you've got someone to rescue you. But yeah, I wanted to get him over here to the hills. One of the reasons I chose this landing spot was because of the mountains. And I especially thought that he could go to the mountains and take a picture of the lander, but the lander's too far away from the mountains. When you're at the mountains, you can't see the landing module here. So then he comes back. Now, and using the jetpacks like this is way faster than walking, which is another part of why I use the jetpacks. And I start to figure out how to jetpack around. Check this out. Eventually, I'm able to make a pretty smooth landing that doesn't look like his neck is going to snap in half as he slides across the surface. See? Now that's a nice, gentle touchdown. It is completely believable that he could continue to perform his mission after a nice, gentle, soft landing like that. I had kind of wanted to set the home module, the lander, down closer to the mountains, but you know, this was an incredibly precise landing for me, even though I'm probably a kilometer or two away from the mountains where I wanted to be right next to. This is still pretty good for me. Um, like I say, I'm getting better at being able to hit my targets, but it's still hard. So this is a part of the home module is it's got a garage. The recon module has a garage. Now I figured out since then that I was a dummy. You're supposed to put a rover inside the garage. I didn't. So here's a garage without a car to park in it, but oh well, it's still cool. And this is the habitat module. It's an inflatable habitat module. It pops out and then it fills up with oxygen. And in theory, your Kerbals can get inside there and live inside there. But this was the first time I used this. I put an engine directly underneath the life support module deployment area. And eventually it hits the engine, explodes the engine, topples the whole module upside down. You'll notice I had just deployed the solar panels when the deployment of the inflatable life support explodes the engine, hurls the thing upside down, and snaps both of my solar panels right off. So that was less than ideal. It turns out you should not put your engines near your life support. As I say that out loud, it seems like common sense, but at the time it was not something that occurred to me. So here we see our two brave Kerbal walking around. One of them is inside the garage. The other one is looking at the life support system and saying, hey, that habitat module is pretty cool. It's too bad it blew stuff up when I opened it up. So here I've loaded from a save point that exists before I blew up the engine and broke off the solar panels by trying to deploy the life support. So from this save spot, I figured maybe if I deploy the life support while I'm off the ground, it won't, because initially I didn't realize it was scraping the engine. I thought as it was inflating, it was hitting the ground, and when as it inflated, it hit the ground and bumped the ship up, and that's why the ship went over ass. It went ass over tea kettle, or whatever the phrase is. So here I am inflating the life support up off the ground, hovering off the ground, thinking that this would be safer, and then I could land gently and have no problems. But you can see the engine underneath the life support module. As it inflates, it hits the engine and causes trouble anyway. There, it exploded. It just ran into the engine and blew it up anyway. Also, it turns out that deploying the life support module like that makes the ship lopsided and unbalanced, and I guess aerodynamic doesn't make sense because Minmus doesn't have an atmosphere, so this is still a vacuum, but it makes it hard to pilot. And so now here we are. This is, see, I was hoping to deploy the life support habitat module better and safer than the first time, and I think this is arguably even more dangerous, less safe. I think, you see all those explosions? I think you could say this was worse. I loaded that save to try to do better, and I failed miserably. So anyway, that was fun and interesting, but ultimately it was not what I wanted to have happen. So I loaded up from a save spot again. And I don't remember what I was trying to do here. Maybe this was more trying to deploy it while I was flying, or maybe no, I'm deep. I'm sucking it back in now. So maybe I hadn't loaded again yet. Maybe I was still trying to salvage that. But obviously I couldn't salvage it. The thing never did fly straight again. And when I tried to land again, see, so much worse. So much worse than the first time. So at this point, because I try not to load save games very often. I try to just, if I make a mistake, I have to live with it, like real life. Loading too many save points is almost cheating. So anyway, I'm trying to salvage things, and I think, well, let's at least abandon ship so he doesn't die when this thing explodes by hitting the ground. So there, it hit the ground, but it didn't actually explode. But this guy who was trying to abandon ship is now hurtling across the Minimusian landscape. I'm not sure he's safer. I'm not sure having him get out of the command module improved his quality of life or odds of continuing his life. Especially since in hindsight, I now know that command module was super sturdy. Even though all the things connected to it exploded as it crashed and rolled along the landscape, the command module, the cockpit, actually survives. And at this point, I'm not sure that he would have been safer in the command module. Because I mean, seriously, Kerbals are made of sturdy stuff, obviously. Because he should have some broken limbs, maybe a snapped neck. I mean, there's no way that a pink-skinned human could survive this. But the green-skinned Kerbals are made of sturdier stuff than people. And that's a good thing, very much a good thing. So here he's going back to examine the command module, and he's realizing that his buddy, who stayed in the command module, is alive and well, and that maybe he was not only a coward, but a fool for leaving the safety of the command module. Now, clearly, I've loaded from my save spot. Yeah. So I was trying to salvage that other one, I think, and even though the crew survived, I finally decided I was just too unhappy with all that. So I loaded up a save spot. This is an experiment in seeing if I could actually land on the hill because I was unhappy with being so far away from it. So this is me lifting off and hovering and flying over to the hill. And I had meant to land. There's a big flat spot on top of this hill, but my piloting and landing is still not great. So you can see I landed on the edge, on the slope, which is not great because it looks like it almost tips over. Fortunately, it doesn't. These landing legs that I'm using are part of the home mod. They're specifically designed by the same people that made the module made those landing legs, and they did a good job because those legs are sturdier than any of the stock stuff I've used. So anyway, you can see from here, I'm trying to get a very cool cinematic shot here. A big part of what I do when I play is just look for the cool pictures. I love all the science fiction pictures and scenes and shots and everything in this game. Sometimes I crash because I'm too busy looking at the scenery. But you can see there's this huge flat area on this hill that I thought would be a good place to land. But I missed and I'm on I'm on the edge of this slope here instead, but oh well, it still looks pretty cool, so. But, so there we go. My mission to Minmus was a success despite all the setbacks. And I did end up eventually loading a save with the guy not, with the module not up on the hill. I went back to that very first save where it's on the flat area. Because ultimately I decided that was safer than having them slanted and looking like they were going to tip over and roll down the hill. And so, yeah, and after I made this video, I went back to Minmus and I've landed some other ships and other Kerbals there. And it's actually become kind of a cool looking little base on Minmus. It's like a moon base, only it's a Minmus base, which is kind of cool. I enjoy Minmus better because it is a lot prettier. And the lower gravity makes it easier to do things like land and jetpack around and stuff. So. Anyway, it's a lot of fun, and there you go. Successfully put Kerbals on Minmus. So what's next? Building a space station, building more of a Minmus base, or traveling outside of the Kerbin system? I've been to the Mun and I've been to Minmus, but there are other planets. They're further away, they're a lot harder to get to, and probably more satisfying and fun to achieve that. So lots of things for me to play around with and experiment with next. Thank you. Have a good night.